Go ahead and take a seat right now. We're going to hear from Tim and Clarissa. Tim and Clarissa work in China teaching English at the university level and sharing life with local fellowships there. For the next 2 years, they'll be studying the language, training third culture kids, and taking on various administrative roles in what they do. Guys, come and share with us a little bit what you're doing.
So up until 5 weeks ago, we would have been standing here individually with our own last names. But as of 5 weeks ago, we are now Tim and Clarissa together. So because we have been separate, we both have very separate stories. We've lived in separate cities, and we have separate things to say. So,
up on the screen, you can see a picture of 5 girls. These 5 girls all became Christians in the last 2.5 years, which is amazing because some years nobody becomes a Christian, and some years only one person does. So these 5 girls, we call them the Fab Five because they make a little group of sisters together. Today, I want to tell you their stories briefly, and afterwards, we have some pictures of them with prayer requests. If you connect with one of them and want to uplift them in prayer, we'd encourage you to go to our table and pick up their picture. So the first one is May, and May is very independent. She is one of the most independent women that I know, but it's not her independence that kept her from making a decision for the Lord. It was her devotion to her Korean pop idol. She loved her idol so much, she bought the lipstick that he endorsed. She bought anything she could to show her devotion to this pop idol. And she really struggled to commit fully to the Lord. Until one night, she had watched The Case for Christ with some of my teammates, and she went back to her dormitory, and as she was laying on her bed, she said for the first time, "God is first in my heart." And that's when she knew she became a Christian. The second picture is of Eunice. Eunice is somebody whose grandmother is a Christian, which is good, because then it means she's at least heard before something about God. So she started doing a study with her roommate, Lucy, who is standing right next to me on the other side. And the two of them, as they did this study, Eunice, as soon as she understood the grace of God, she was ready to make that decision for the Lord. But Lucy took a lot longer, because Lucy's family, there's nobody who's a Christian. And in fact, when she even brought up the topic of Christianity with her family, her father went off into this tirade against Christianity that really made Lucy feel very intimidated about making this decision. For her, the turning point came when she had the courage to go out of the country to 2 countries in Southeast Asia on vacation without telling her parents. And when she got back from that trip, she thought, man, if I'm independent enough to go out of the country without telling my parents, I think I'm independent enough to also make this decision to become a Christian. Next to her is Grace. Grace had another English name when she first entered university, but she changed her name to Grace without even really understanding what that word meant. She would ask a lot of questions about Christianity to one of my teammates, who then invited her to do a study, a 6-week study, walking her through the story of the Bible. At the end, and she invited me to join them in that study. At the end of that 6-week study, Grace was so ready to commit her life to God. But for her, the challenge was growing in her depth and knowledge about grace and about who God is. Next to her is Shirley. Grace and Shirley are classmates, but they're pretty different. Grace is motivated a lot by her feelings, whereas Shirley is much more intellectual. Both of her parents are teachers, and she loves to read. So she has read so many books. And for her, as she went to university, went to English activities, and started to really think critically about life, she joined this debate team. She started to question, what is the meaning of life? And she thought, all of life is meaningless. What's going on? And she kind of went into a spiral. For her, what pulled her out of that spiral was going to a camp for disabled children where she was paired with Christian volunteers in China, and she saw the love that those Christian volunteers had for the children. And she thought, man, they're really different. Why do they love those kids so much? She went back, and in her own words, she had a debate with herself about the concept of God and is he real? And finally, she too made the decision to accept God as her Savior. I am so full of joy that these girls all chose to commit their lives to God. We had a meal together weekly this past semester, and just seeing their community as they came from different grades, different campuses, but they grew together as the Fab Five, little family of sisters together. So please join me in praying for them. You're welcome to pick up a card. And Tim, his relationships, they went deep as well.
So this is Connor, and last summer, Connor had a big, really, really important test. And if he failed it, it was his last chance to pass. He'd already failed it a couple times. He knew this was going to be a big deal. So he said, these foreigners, sometimes they'll pray. So I'll pray, and how about this? God, if I pass the test, I'll go to church. He passed the test. So when I came back last September, he was like, hey, I need to go to church with you. I was like, why? He's like, because I passed this test. I'm like, okay, cool. And so seeing him develop over the year of going to church and connecting with other believers, these are other believers that I've known for several years at that church, and just the way that God works in people and through people. I've met with Connor, I've prayed for Connor. At times, why didn't I pray for Connor sooner? Apparently, if I had, maybe something would have started sooner. But who can plan these things? You go on an orphanage trip or you go on a test, and that's the thing that turns them from to wait, maybe this is truth. So all of us have a place in this. Am I special? Sure, but not really. I'm not really any different than any other person, but I'm just the one that is there at that moment. And they're like, oh, you go to church, you pray, so maybe this is what I can do too.
If you want to hear more from Tim and Clarissa, you can join them after the service in room 150. We're going to hear from David and Karen Bradley next. David and Karen work with the Jesus Film Project. David serves as the Worldwide Field Strategy Director. That's an awesome title. Leading the team that equips those on the front lines to strategically use the Jesus Film Project for evangelism and discipleship. Let's welcome them.
So 20 years ago, we were sitting in this congregation and listening to a call from God on our lives in 1999. And this church was a big part of that. We were 11 years at this church, and it was a lot of fun to be with all of you during that process, and it's fun to be back with you today. When we think about the Jesus Film today, you can really think about it in terms of two areas of focus: every tribe and every touch screen.
So the original Jesus Film was made in 1979, and since then has been translated into 1,683 languages. As well, we have produced other films, The Magdalena for women, The Story of Jesus for children, and some follow-up films, Rivka, Walking with Jesus Africa, and Following Jesus for India, as well as some short films to start spiritual conversations are available as well. You can stop by our table down in the foyer to pick up a free DVD. So when as David was mentioning, that every tribe, we are referring to the fact that there are as many as 5,000 languages that do not have the Jesus Film. Now, these are the hard languages. These are hard because, for many reasons, they're remote, they live in hostile areas, or some may not even have a written language. And then the other hard part is if they don't have the Gospel of Luke translated, that is what the Jesus Film is based on. So pray for us as we work to bring the story of Jesus to these people in their heart language.
So a little bit more context. As of yesterday, Google said there was about 7.4 something billion people living on the face of the earth. That's a lot. About 2 billion of those would self-identify as Christian. Now, whether or not they're following Jesus or not, they would self-identify as Christian. That leaves 5.4 billion people that need to be in a church, they need to hear the good news, they need to know what Jesus has done for them. Interestingly enough, out of that 5.4 billion that need to be reached, about a quarter of those live in India, and about a quarter of those live in China. So it's good to hear that we're supporting missionaries that are working in China. About a little more than half of those live in cities, and more people are moving to cities every day. And so the city becomes an ongoing challenge. So when Karen talked about every tribe, when you think about that 5.4 billion, that's only about 3% of the remaining tasks to be done. But we still want to reach everyone in their heart language. But what do we do about the rest of those, the majority of those cultures that many of them are connected? They live in a city. They're media sophisticated potentially. They're watching movies. So that's where the every touch screen comes in. The idea of getting the Jesus film on every device, every touch screen that's out there. I don't have to buy anybody this. They already have it. So if we can get media and our tools onto the touch screens, it makes a lot of sense. So the Jesus film has been investing a lot of our energy and time and resources in thinking about, okay, how do we enter into the digital realm? So for example, we've divided, if you go on, we have an app, and I'll tell you about that in a second, but if you go onto the app, we've divided the Jesus film into 61 segments because a lot of the younger folks, they don't want to watch a 2-hour docudrama on the life of Christ, but they might watch a 5-minute segment. And so we're talking about the YouTube generation here. And all of us have seen it. We know what's going on. I've even lost my attention span to some degree. So it's fun to be able to engage. We have a presence on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. We're really trying to get the Jesus film out there. As a matter of fact, in China, there's their parallel to Facebook is called WeChat. And I don't know why we've had so much grace, but for the last several years, we've been able to put the Jesus film on that WeChat system, and people are able to view it in China on WeChat. So it's been a lot of fun to enter into the digital realm. And now I'm going to encourage you, stop by the desk and grab one of our app cards to give to somebody else and have them download it. But if you don't have the Jesus Film app on your phone, it's just called Jesus Film. Download it on your phone, and then you can be a mobile missionary. You have everything that we have in the Jesus Film. All 1,683 languages, all of our follow-up films, all of our short films, everything you now have on your phone. And you can use it for conversations with folks. I've used it in a 3-minute standing in line waiting at Walmart, and I hear a language I don't know what it is. I'll ask them, hey, what language are you speaking? Oh, well, I'm speaking Hausa. Well, I have a film in that language, and I look it up, and I play it for them, and they say, hey, where'd you get that? What is that? And so I hit forward. Oh, it opens up my email. I hand them my phone. They type in their email address. I hit send. Boom, there's a link sitting on their computer at home where they poke on that link, and they're now watching the Jesus Film in their language. You can do that. All of you can do that. So I would encourage you to be a mobile missionary, to think about what you do as you connect with people in your neighborhood that are not first English language speakers. And thank you for praying for us. Pray for us as we move into the digital realm, as we reach every tribe and every touchscreen. Thank you.
If you're like me and you missed the second half of their presentation because you were downloading the app on your phone, you can join them in room 248 after this to hear more. We're going to hear from Mark and Charlene Canada next. Mark and Charlene have a gift for seeing a need and meeting the need. Part of that is pioneering marketplace development enterprises, which has the goal of helping people make money and make disciples. What that means is they promote church planting by partnering with mature believers who are taking the message of Jesus to workplaces in unreached communities around the world. Guys, thanks.
Share stories that will inspire our people to see themselves as potential missionaries. Stories that will encourage our people to use their unique giftedness in missions, the email said. Now, the email wasn't very clear on this next point, but I'm pretty sure there was an implied offer of a fabulous prize to the person who told the most stories. Charlene and I love fabulous prizes. So hold on to your hats, as they used to say. Here we go. Josiah Hawley is a singer and musician who appeared on the TV show The Voice a few years back. And as a result of that show, he developed a pretty significant following. So he and his wife, Hannah, moved to LA to build his music career. Things were going well, but God challenged them to move from LA to Tokyo. They responded to that call by calling MDE. And since then, we've had the privilege of partnering with them in this endeavor. We have the privilege of connecting them with both business and personal support as they are there. And I know Josiah would appreciate your prayers for his first concert. It's going to happen in about a week, where he's the headliner. So it's a pretty big opportunity there. And I know he would also appreciate your prayers as he continues to use his musical gifts to develop relationships with non-believers in the Japanese musical community. Relationships that will allow him to share the true, ultimate source of his gifts and talents.
Josiah's wife, Hannah, is a gifted writer and editor, and when she's not working to promote Josiah's music, she's using those skills as a freelance editor. Hannah, although an introvert, loves to help people, so she's using that gift to help young Japanese women work on their English. She's also reaching out to people by playing dodgeball on Tuesday nights, which apparently rivals karaoke as a favorite thing for people to do in Tokyo these days. She is building relationships that give her the opportunity to take the presence and the message of Jesus to people who desperately need to see and hear both. She has chosen to do what she did here in the U.S., there in Tokyo. Okay, not the dodgeball part, but everything else, so that people can see what it looks like to follow Christ as a normal person striving to work in the marketplace. Which brings us to Jeffrey. Jeffrey was a business grad student who wanted to use his growing marketing skills in missions. Well, he got a hold of us and we connected him to Dawn in Albania, who needed to help market his wood-burning stoves. MDE helped Jeffrey raise enough money so he could spend the summer with Dawn, where he helped improve the business's marketing materials. Jeffrey is now dialoguing with Josiah and Hannah about spending some time in Tokyo to help them promote Josiah's business.
Lauren is an engineer working for a U.S.-based international company, and she was given a 6-month assignment in an unreached community, and she called us. She said she didn't think she was going to get a get out of disciple making free card while she was there, and so she wanted support. She strove to be faithful and obedient to the command to make disciples. So we connected her with a church body there. We helped her to build a disciple-making plan. We introduced her to Nancy Wooden, who served as her coach and mentor, and off she went. While there, Lauren met a Chinese co-worker and built a relationship with the woman, took her to church, gave her an English-Chinese Bible, and is still corresponding with her today about what she's reading in her new Bible. Steve oversees a billion-dollar product line for Dell out west, and he had honed his marketing and management skills over the last 30 years and wanted to somehow use them for missions and to help missions move forward, but he wasn't sure exactly how to do that. So he reached out to us, and we added him to our faculty of advisors to help vet business and marketing plans developed by our BAM ventures.
Chad ran a carpet and furniture store in Missouri, but having grown up in Florida, he was passionate and still is about scuba diving. He's an internationally certified diving instructor and a certified diving equipment repair person. I have to read that part. Sensing a call to Spain, he is now using his gifts and passion for scuba diving to launch a diving venture on the Mediterranean. His customers come and go with not a lot of opportunity to share the gospel, but the people he hires to help him, and his equipment vendors, and his employees at the water park where he gives lessons daily, and his neighbors who watch him struggle to launch and run a business, those people are seeing God in action day after day after day, seeing God work in a way that they can relate to. Becky was an elementary school teacher in the D.C. area, and she was challenged to use her teaching skills in an unreached community and called MDE. We were aware of numerous opportunities and connected her with a school in northern Africa. Same skills, same classroom challenges, different location, and significantly increased opportunity to influence her new community for Christ.
We could tell you about Jonathan, the MBA grad student in China, Tamar using her admin skills in Israel, Jim in Iowa City using his business management skills to help our BAM ventures in multiple countries, and Nick Carter using his ag and entrepreneurial skills to help us and other BAMers, and Dawn and Jack and Olivia and Tori and Shurish and Mirambek, and the world has changed. Yeah, Skype, Zoom, VC, WhatsApp, WeChat, FaceTime, emails, YouTube. those have all changed the way people connect around the globe, and it's changing the way that we do business around the globe. And missions is changing as well. The vision and goal remain the same, but the strategy and the tactics are changing. They have to change. The gifts and skills that are needed to move missions forward have expanded exponentially. We encourage you to talk with God about how you could or should be using yours.
And the fabulous prize for most inspiring stories goes to the Canadas. Johnny, tell them what they've won.
You win a leftover pie.
Congratulations, guys. Thanks for welcoming Marlene Benz. Marlene works with Crew as an international staff coordinator, working with 15 different international partnerships. She's answering God's call, helping staff transition to kingdom work around the world.
Well, in 2003, I was wrapping up my third and final year serving in Macedonia. That particular summer, we welcomed a group of university students from Miami University, which included Jesse and Melissa. Jesse and Melissa and I found ourselves back at Miami that next fall after I had returned from Macedonia, and I had the privilege of getting to disciple them as they finished out their time at Miami. Once they graduated, both of them went on to serve for a couple years in Macedonia. Prior to Jesse coming, the 2 years before, Toshe, who you see pictured in the family picture there, Toshe showed up on the university campus in Skopje, which is the capital city of Macedonia. And he showed up doing his music, very talented pianist, and was very confident, a bit arrogant, but when one of my teammates shared the gospel with him, his heart was open and he began to grow. He accepted Christ and began to grow and became passionate about sharing his faith with his classmates. Well, as we know, God's work in people's lives is attractive. And so when Jesse came to Macedonia and they had a chance to meet, they quickly were attracted to each other and fell in love and ended up getting married. After they married, they returned to Macedonia and continued to do work on the university campus, building up a ministry there, and to a point where there were laborers being raised up. And as that team was starting to grow, they caught the vision for, hey, there are other campuses around the country where students aren't having the opportunity to hear about Christ. What if we pioneered a team that started taking the gospel there? And so they started doing that. And then as God continued to work in their lives, the Lord started casting vision for them of how they could be used significantly in the community in Skopje around them, reaching leaders. And so now they work with a ministry of Crew called Leader Impact. What's so encouraging to me is that you fast forward so many years, past 2000 when I was there, and the Lord's work has continued through the labors of people like Jesse and Toshe. And what began in 1997 originally with our first summer mission trip of university students going from the U.S. to Macedonia, has now become Macedonians in the country taking the gospel to university students, to high school students, to leaders in the community, using the Magdalena film that Jesus Film has to take the gospel to women in communities where the husbands are real resistant to them being involved in the church, and yet they're able through this film to be involved in Bible studies and respond to the gospel. And we're seeing them take leadership to run a Speak Out English camp in the summer. And what's super, super exciting to me about that is it's all under the leadership of a dear Macedonian brother. And so the Macedonians have really taken the baton and carried that forward. And just recently, I received an email from Jessie where she reminded me of this map that I had shared with her many years ago, back 2003, 2004. And she shared this: "We've become a sending nation, Mar. I remember you giving me your support-raising files to use with the map and the arrows going out of Macedonia. Well, guess what? They're going out. More than a decade later, we see that the Lord saw fit to answer these hopes and prayers. For me, my time in Macedonia was a time the Lord used to help me see and embrace that I'm more administratively wired, and I do best in roles where I have a blend of people and tasks. And so for about 10 years after I served in Macedonia, I was here in Indianapolis, and that's where I got to know this faith church and call it my family, my home family. And I served there primarily giving oversight to our application processes, but doing some other things with HR. And then many of you know a few years back, the Lord really caught me off guard when he raised this need in New Zealand to go help with HR there. And to be honest with you, my first answer was, no way. It was not on my bucket list, but the Lord put it there, and I'm grateful for the couple years that I had to serve and to help the ministry there. And just returned early March, and I've sort of been floating back in, and now I'm serving in our office in Westfield, in Crew's office in Westfield. As Joy mentioned, I'm serving as an international staff coordinator. And in that role, I now get to play a part in helping send more people like Jesse, where they get to go and help launch ministries on campuses, where we see national laborers raised up, and they get to serve alongside them. And I get excited when I see this last slide, and I know as you look at it, you can't fully see the faces, but I put them up because, oh man, I wish you could sit and have a coffee with each of these. We've got national staff teams, Macedonians serving in Macedonia, New Zealanders serving in New Zealand, people of the Pacific Islands taking the gospel there. And these are just 3 examples of locations around the world where believers of other nations have been raised up, have responded to the call to take the gospel to their nation and to places beyond. And our hope as we send those initial mission trips isn't just that it be a nice experience for our students who go, although it is a great summer for them, but our hope is that people in these nations having their lives transformed by the gospel, that they'll be raised up to become laborers in their nations, and that eventually these nations are going to become sending nations, because we know that the Great Commission is not just a call to Americans, but it's God's call for people in all nations to be raised up to profess his name and to help play their unique part in helping fulfill the Great Commission.
All right. You can hear more from Marlene and maybe get your hands on some of that New Zealand chocolate, unless I didn't eat it all, did I? Never mind. In room 248, 148, right after the service.